Today I thought I'd bring you a stream that doesn't so much take a deep dive down the rabbit hole, it's more pulling a band-aid off an old wound to see how it's healing. I'm Lindsay from Freedom Media WA, and this is a discussion today about what happens when the state of emergency in Western Australia ends. On the 16th of August 2022, a good friend of Premier Mark McGowan, Mr. Kerry Stokes' newspaper, ran the following headline. As you can just see from the headline, you've seen Premier Mark McGowan has signalled that WA's state of emergency declaration, which was enforced at the height of the COVID pandemic, could come to an end, which has been running approximately 900 days plus and counting. When you consider the headline, on the face of it, many may say that this is actually a cause for celebration, as things sound like they may be appearing to be returning to normal. But will they? The current WA Liberal Party in opposition has been touting that they have led the calls for the state of emergency to cease. You would think that this would be a good thing. Well, Dr. David Honey, MP, and his team have also been calling on Premier Mark McGowan, instead of passing laws through Parliament, to enforce the remaining COVID laws. So what is the issue with that? You only have to look at the laws that were introduced back in 2016 when the then Liberal Premier Colin Barnett made regarding the changes to the West Australian Public Health Act 2016 that saw a law introduced like section 158 of that act. If by now you're not aware of what that section entails, then I'm not sure what it will take before a law is introduced in our West Australian Parliament before you may ask yourself, how did this happen? If anyone feels it's appropriate for police to forcibly hold a person down, including children, to administer a vaccination as directed, and the powers enable them to remove underwear, I really don't know what to say in relation to that. I can only hope that you may now consider that any such laws that come into place, and that it's not too late to see what else may be coming down the pipeline. And this is what I'm talking about in respect of the mandates ending the state of emergency and introducing legislation. In the West Australian article, Premier Mark McGowan flagged that he is considering following suit, the same as they did in South Australia, and alarmingly in Victoria a few months ago, with the introduction and passing of its pandemic management bill. McGowan in that article said, and I quote, "We are looking at what can be done in terms of having a different regime." And I just need to make sure that I get this quote right. "As soon as we can do that, we will." That's what Premier Mark McGowan said. If you don't have any concerns when it comes to time for Premier McGowan to consider passing his law, because he clearly has something in mind, then I'd invite you to consider this. Throughout the pandemic, Premier McGowan stonewalled any questions regarding health advice which he relied upon in order to continue the rolling state of emergency, which was an essential perpetual state of emergency here in Western Australia. The opposition WA Attorney General Nick Gorin MP recently asked McGowan's Emergency Services Minister, Stephen Dawson, a question in an inquiry here. Let's take a look.
Is the existence of a public health state of emergency, which I appreciate you don't declare, that's the health minister who does that, but is the existence of that a factor that you take into account when you decide whether to extend the state of emergency or not?
The information, no, so it's not necessarily.
It's irrelevant to your considerations.
Well, I'm aware of it, but my decisions are made solely on the advice of the State Emergency Coordinator.
That advice that he gets, which is written advice from the Chief Health Officer, Are you prepared to provide that to this committee?
I don't get a copy of the advice that the Chief Health Officer provides to him.
Are you prepared to provide that to this committee?
I don't get a copy of the advice that the Chief Health Officer provides to him.
There you go. One of those things that you just won't know until you hear. There are many around Premier Mark McGowan who have either been complicit or echoed his narrative, including the former Governor Kim Beazley, a person who has four main roles, including to advocate on behalf of the West Australian people. I spoke to former Governor Beazley at Anzac Day 2022 this year. Have a listen to him advocate on behalf of the West Australian people. Good morning, Governor Beazley. Lindsay from Freedom Media, Perth. Can I just ask a comment? Do you feel that the people of Western Australia have had opportunity to adequately pay their respects at Anzac Day this side of the barricade, with numbers being capped at 500?
Well, I think one of the things that's happened is that the people of Western Australia have taken matters into their own hands. Like my two other daughters, one of my daughters is with me, like my two other, representing my wife, like my two other daughters, they have been standing in their driveways. Tens of thousands have. It's actually become a thing. Although next Anzac Day, I'm totally sure that we won't have any COVID restrictions and there'll be the usual 50,000 here.
So I'm just, with level 2 restrictions, I didn't think there was actually any COVID restrictions currently.
Well, this is not of my organisation, but I have to tell you this. RSL always does what is a sensible, publicly conscious job of running these services. So I wouldn't criticise them for a minute. Oh, there's no criticism at all. But I guess traditionally the RSL have worked over a number of years to bring the public back to commemorate Anzac Day, and they now find themselves being told to stand at home in the driveways. Well, I hope that standing at home in the driveways at dawn becomes a national habit. Because if you've got 40 or 50,000 here, which we'd normally get, where is the other 2.5 million? And if a large proportion of the other 2.5 million are in their driveways, what a wonderful thing. Thank you. Yes, I'm sure you'd find, quite a few conflicting comments in relation there from Governor Beazley, that his vision is, you've just heard him say that he hopes that people from Western Australia and Anzac Day continue the tradition of standing in their driveways to commemorate Anzac Day. There was barricades in place that was segregating the public from those 500 VIPs, including many of the veterans, and we understand in terms of the COVID safety, but it was an outdoor public event. Bearing in mind, 2 weeks before that, when we had particular lockdown conditions in play, the state government, Premier Mark McGowan, opened up Optus Stadium for some 30,000 people to attend that particular football game there, yet people couldn't attend up at Kings Park to commemorate Anzac Day. McGowan has, with his recommended and newly appointed WA Governor, ex-Police Commissioner Chris Dawson, who ended his police career as the WA Pandemic Vaccination Commander, in his role, I would suggest to you that you would need bucket loads of hopium if you feel that Chris Dawson may advocate on behalf of Western Australian people. Because remember, after all, it was Chris Dawson that said this.
Some groups, including Aboriginal people. So this effort is going to be targeted specifically. Rather than expect people will come to places such as this health campus, we know that some groups are staying in their homes. So that means we'll be going door to door.
But there we go. That's now that's a person who's representing Western Australia. The Queen's appointment, recommended by Mark McGowan. His role, Chris Dawson, is there to advocate for people of Western Australia. And you can see his mindset. He's of the ilk that, at the heart of the pandemic, for those most vulnerable, our First Nation people up north, there was many rumours of what happened and some footage that came through in the Northern Territory. And we know what occurred then. They went door to door. There has to be a real concern when they try as hard as they may. And this is the WA Liberal Party, Dr. David Honey and his team in opposition. They simply don't have anywhere near the numbers to block any legislation that McGowan is likely to introduce to replace the 900-day plus rolling state of emergency. And that surely must be a cause for concern. I also can't help but forget that Dr. David Honey, a man who has a PhD in applied chemistry, which would go without saying that he would have a sound knowledge of science, yet at the thick of McGowan's state emergency and the lockdowns, based on non-transparent science, which McGowan wasn't disclosing, it appears Dr. David Honey has only recently found his voice. Like Governor Beazley, I also spoke to the WA Liberal Party leader on Anzac Day this year at the State War Memorial. Have a listen to what Dr. David Honey says. Yeah, Dr. David Honey, hello, good morning. Lindsay from Freedom Media.
You're Freedom.
Yes, I am. Dr. Honey, can I just ask you, so I noticed your post yesterday talking about the twilight service last night, and in terms of that, how do you feel about the people from Western Australia being isolated, I guess, from being able to commemorate the Anzac Day service that you've just partaken in yourself?
I mean, obviously it's up to the RSL to do what they think is best, and they've done what they think is best, and that's I think it'd be nice if we could have people here, but it's up to the RSL to organise it, and they had to do what they thought was safe, and I have great respect for the RSL and the good work they do.
I appreciate that. Can I just ask you that Governor Kim Beazley has just expressed that his vision is that the tradition of standing in people's driveways continues going forward. That's the vision that he's just given us comment on. Would you agree with that?
I think he was making a general comment. We'll see what happens in the year. I mean, we'll return to normal as time goes on. But look, have a lovely day, and happy Anzac Day to all of your viewers. Cheers.
So there we go. The view there from Dr. David Honey is that the vision may return to normal next year. I guess make of that what you will, whether the narrative collapses or dies from there. You've just seen Dr. David Honey, I guess, had a post out a couple of days ago where he spoke about attending a Twilight Zone dawn service, and then discouraging people from coming up to the State War Memorial here at Kings Park, where traditionally, as you've heard, there's no dispute from Governor Beazley or Dr. David Honey that people would be here in their thousands. And now the vision and hope is that they continue standing at home, or those that are telling people at home from a VIP viewpoint are then turning up here and being part of dawn service themselves. Whether that is to ensure that they feel comfortable with the position of being able to be here. There's a lot of emotion with people here that want to pay their respects, but do feel as though they've been segregated and isolated from actually being part of the dawn service. We heard a number of people tell us this morning that they were issued and threatened with move-on notices simply for standing too close to a barricade. So there we go. Was it a case of Kim Beazley was just making a general comment? In Victoria, we've seen the largest protests ever likely or held in Australia, and this is where people have been taking to the streets because of the proposed powers that Victorian Premier Dan Andrews sought to implement with his pandemic management bill. This is something that potentially Mark McGowan may be looking to issue similarly in lieu of the state of emergency. A quick Google search will reveal many headlines regarding the concerns over that particular bill in Victoria. And you can just throw that in and have a look. Here's just a few examples to show you. So the Andrews government bill sought to give Premier Dan Andrews power to declare a pandemic and the Health Minister authority to make health orders without a single case of COVID, granting sweeping new powers to the Premier and to the Health Minister. It sought to introduce heavy penalties, including a 2-year jail term for Victorians and businesses, huge fines if they breach any of the public health laws now. Opposing Victoria's new pandemic legislation that Premier Dan Andrews was seeking to introduce, it was extraordinary powers. It saw 14 signatories out of 60 Queen's Council and the Victorian Bar Association in a letter, a damning letter to Dan Andrews, wrote the following: given the low threshold for the making of the declaration, that's the declaration that he was seeking to introduce in law. Then they went on and said, and the fact that COVID-19 is unlikely to go away at any time soon, we can expect a pandemic declaration to be in force for the foreseeable future. This is again from the letter that the Victorian Bar wrote. It went on to say that thus the minister's power to make the pandemic orders will remain in place for the foreseeable future. Of course, and that's the end of the letter. And then we see coverage from mainstream media of Victorians taking to the streets was not as a result of wanting to employ quality journalism. It was because the protest rallies were so large that they had no choice to cover them. At the peak of that, it was rumoured to be 650 to 700,000 people took to the streets over this issue. Let's take a look.
Thousands of people have brought the city to a standstill, rallying on the steps of State Parliament demanding the Premier be sacked. The protesters again fighting proposed laws that would give Daniel Andrews the power to declare a pandemic. Here's our state political reporter, Mark Santomartino.
You couldn't see a square inch of the road, tram tracks or footpaths beneath a sea of frustrated Victorians stretching for blocks down Bourke Street, returning for the largest rally yet against the Premier's proposed pandemic laws.
What concerns me? Well, personal freedom, personal movement, medical apartheid.
They came from all directions, starting at the State Library, swarming through the city, carrying the Madonna and a familiar-looking punching bag.
Self-proclaimed, undisputed lockdown champion of the world, Mr. Dan Andrews. It's just a memento for today. It's not about punching it. We're about a peaceful protest and really understanding why we're here, to kill the bill.
There's an election coming and they'll have to answer to all these people.
Claire Woodley dedicating her father's famous song, We Are One,
to the brave victims and survivors of satanic ritual abuse.
a conspiracy theory less prevalent in a larger, more diverse and mostly peaceful crowd.
Many of the people that you see here are just normal everyday people worried about their jobs, they're worried about their kids, they're worried about their rights being infringed, and they want to take a stand for it, and good on them.
Enough is enough. Business is already hard enough as it is without having these political rocks thrown in their road.
Well, the protest has been going for hours, the rain has started to fall, and even more are continuing to arrive. This group is walking up Spring Street toward the steps of State Parliament, where already tens of thousands of people are. Groups were splintering off and circling back through the streets, chanting with every step.
I'm not an anti-vaxxer, I'm not a pro-vaxxer, I'm a pro-choicer. So it's all about choice. Our body, our decision.
No politician should ever have this power.
Chris Holloway has a medical exemption he says counts for nothing.
Every single day I'm going into shops and businesses and I'm being refused service because I'm unvaccinated, even with my exemption. And that's wrong. I don't have the virus.
The Premier has refused to put an end date on locking out Victoria's unvaccinated, rules that will be enforced under new pandemic laws if and when they pass the upper house.
It's up to us to become proactive in the political process.
So what do you think you will do when McGowan ends the state of emergency prior to January 2023, when it's currently signed in? Will you want to have an interest in what laws might be proposed? I would say perhaps yes. Well, I hope that this stream has been thought-provoking enough that it may give you some insight as to might be coming down the pipeline. I certainly feel many more people need to take a keen interest in what may be coming before the pronouns of freedom became was and were. So thank you for bearing with us. We will certainly be going back through, had a little bit more to bring, but there has been a few tech issues. So I think on that note, we might just end the stream here, and we certainly look forward to bringing you more content, in the future, similar of this nature. It has been a baptism by fire. Much work, as you can see behind the scenes. A number of people have been working tirelessly, and they know who they are. And we will be doing a stream where some of these people that have helped set up the studios of Freedom Media WA to bring you content like this. So I guess the question is, whilst there has been much opposition to the rolling declarations on a fortnightly basis, and again, as we know, without actually seeing any of the science behind this, what is potentially the worst of the two evils? And I would say that if it takes a similar line as what happened in Victoria in terms of introducing a pandemic management bill, which I might say was watered down towards the very end in order for it to get passed, because there was some opposition. Opposition that here in Western Australia, they just simply don't have the opposition. McGowan pretty much can get whatever he wishes to get through the lower and the upper house, because there isn't the opposition for that. But interestingly, one of the things that remained in there was the potential of 2 years jail imprisonment for failing to comply with no longer a health direction, but a health law that he sought to introduce. This is Dan Andrews, and that wasn't watered down. An individual can face up to $42,500 if they fail to follow the pandemic laws. Let's hope, fingers crossed, that this isn't what's coming down the pipeline. But if it is, the only way that you're going to know this is you need, I suggest, to take much more of an interest. There is more than ever before a time you need to be aware of the laws that are being pushed and tabled in Parliament Western Australia now going forward. Otherwise, you'll see a repeat like Section 158 of the WA Health Act here. So hope you enjoy your day today. For now, that I think have covered the discussion point. Thank you very much for all those that have commented. We will go through there and give some replies where we can. And thank you for your patience with a couple of tech issues. But I guess that's the thing going live. Tested fine. Go live and there you go. But that's it. From myself, Lindsay from Freedom Media, and the team behind, thank you very much. Enjoy your day.